What if I told you that the future of artificial intelligence isn't controlled by NVIDIA or Apple or even OpenAI? What if I told you that behind every breakthrough AI model, every next-generation smartphone, every powerful graphics card, there's one company quietly pulling the strings? A company so important that if it stopped working for just a few weeks, the entire technology industry could fall into chaos. Sounds impossible? Then let me ask you something. When you buy an iPhone, who do you think made the chip inside it? Apple. When you hear about NVIDIA's record-breaking AI GPUs, who do you think actually builds them? NVIDIA. It feels like the obvious answer, but it's completely wrong. Because the biggest secret in the technology industry is that the world's most valuable tech companies don't manufacture their own most advanced chips. Instead, they all rely on a single company. A company that most people have never heard of. It doesn't advertise during the Super Bowl. It doesn't launch flashy keynote events. It doesn't compete for your attention. Yet without it, there would be no ChatGPT as we know it. No cutting-edge NVIDIA GPUs, no Apple Silicon. No race for artificial intelligence. And here's the craziest part, this company became one of the most powerful businesses on Earth, without most people even knowing its name. While the world celebrated billion-dollar product launches, it quietly built the machines that made those products possible. While headlines focused on Apple, Google, Microsoft, and NVIDIA, this company was becoming something far more valuable. It became the foundation of the entire digital economy. Today, governments spend billions trying to protect it. Economists warn that losing it could trigger one of the biggest supply chain crises in history. Military experts call it one of the world's most strategic assets. Not because it owns oil, not because it controls the internet, but because it manufactures something even more important: the tiny chips that power almost every advanced technology on Earth. So how did one company become more important than some of the biggest brands in history? Why can't trillion-dollar companies simply build these chips themselves? And why is the future of AI resting in the hands of a business that most people have never heard of? The answer begins with one tiny piece of silicon, smaller than your fingernail, yet more powerful than almost anything humanity has ever created. And once you understand how that tiny chip is made, you'll understand why one company quietly became the hidden king of the AI revolution. This is the story of the company that controls every AI chip. For thousands of years, the world's most valuable resources were easy to recognize. Gold-built empires, oil-powered economies, and whoever controlled them controlled the world. But today, the most valuable resource isn't buried underground. It isn't pumped from the earth. In fact, you can barely even see it. It's a tiny semiconductor chip, smaller than your fingernail, yet capable of performing trillions of calculations every second. Every Google search, every AI-generated image, every ChatGPT response, every Tesla on the road, every fighter jet in the sky, every modern hospital depends on these tiny pieces of silicon. They have become the invisible engine of modern civilization. But here's the question almost nobody asks. If these chips are so important, why can't everyone make them? Why can't Apple simply build its own processors? Why doesn't NVIDIA manufacture its own AI GPUs? Why doesn't every country build factories and become self-sufficient? The answer is because manufacturing a modern chip is one of the hardest things humanity has ever attempted. Imagine trying to build a city, not the size of New York, but on something smaller than your thumbnail. Now imagine placing billions of tiny electronic switches inside that space, each one perfectly connected, each one working flawlessly, billions of times every second. That's exactly what engineers are doing. And the margin for error is almost zero. A single microscopic particle of dust, something completely invisible to your eyes, can destroy an entire chip worth thousands of dollars. That's why chip factories are cleaner than hospital operating rooms. The air is constantly filtered. Workers wear full-body protective suits. Even the smallest vibration, a tiny change in temperature, or a nearly invisible contamination can ruin an entire production batch worth millions of dollars. But cleanliness is only one part of the challenge. The real magic happens inside machines so advanced, they almost sound like science fiction. These machines fire incredibly powerful beams of light, so precise that it can carve microscopic circuits onto silicon with astonishing accuracy. They don't simply manufacture chips. They sculpt them, layer by layer, atom by atom, until billions of transistors come together to create one of the most complex objects ever built by human hands. Building just one of these factories can cost more than $20 billion. But even unlimited money isn't enough, because the real advantage isn't the buildings or the machines. It's the experience, the knowledge gained from decades of solving problems that nobody else has ever faced. And that's exactly why, despite having some of the smartest engineers on Earth, companies like Apple, NVIDIA, AMD, Qualcomm, and even governments all depend on someone else. Because building the future isn't just about having the best ideas. It's about mastering the impossible. And one company has been mastering the impossible for nearly 4 decades, while the rest of the world was barely paying attention. Every empire has an origin story, and the story of the world's most important chip company begins with a man who believed the entire semiconductor industry was doing things the wrong way. His name was Morris Chang. Long before AI, long before smartphones, and decades before NVIDIA became one of the most valuable companies on Earth, Chang saw a problem that almost nobody else noticed. Back then, chip companies had to do everything themselves. They designed the chips, built expensive factories, manufactured the chips, and then sold them to customers. It was slow, expensive, and incredibly risky. If you wanted to create a better processor, you first had to spend billions building factories before selling a single chip. For many brilliant engineers with revolutionary ideas, that was impossible. But Morris Chang had a different vision. He asked a simple question. What if one company didn't design any chips at all? What if it focused on only one thing? Manufacturing the world's best chips, while letting everyone else focus on innovation? At first, the idea sounded ridiculous. Why would companies trust another business with their most valuable technology? What if their designs were stolen? What if the manufacturer became a competitor? Investors laughed. Industry veterans dismissed the idea as unrealistic. They believed no company could survive by only manufacturing chips. But in 1987, with support from Taiwan, Morris Chang took the biggest gamble of his life. He founded a company called Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or simply TSMC. From the very beginning, TSMC made one promise that changed everything. It would never compete with its customers. It would never launch smartphones, never design processors, never sell computers. Its only mission was to become the greatest chip manufacturer the world had ever seen. That promise became its greatest strength. Companies that would never trust a competitor were suddenly willing to trust TSMC. Small startups became customers. Then larger technology companies followed. Year after year, TSMC reinvested almost everything it earned into building better factories, hiring better engineers, and developing more advanced manufacturing processes. While other companies chased headlines, TSMC chased perfection. It became obsessed with one question: how do we manufacture smaller, faster, and more efficient chips than anyone else on Earth? That obsession created something almost impossible to copy. Every customer made TSMC smarter. Every new chip taught it something new. Every manufacturing challenge became another advantage over its competitors. Slowly, without attracting much public attention, TSMC built a lead that the rest of the industry didn't fully understand. By the time companies realized how far ahead TSMC had become, the gap was already enormous. But even then, few people imagined just how important TSMC would become, because the biggest technology revolution in history was still about to begin. And one company, Apple, was about to place a bet that would change both its own future and TSMC's forever. By the late 2000s, Apple wasn't just building smartphones anymore. It was building an ecosystem. Steve Jobs believed that if Apple wanted to create the best products in the world, it couldn't rely entirely on off-the-shelf processors. The company needed chips designed specifically for its own devices. So Apple assembled some of the world's brightest chip engineers and began designing its own processors. It was a bold move, and it worked. The iPhone became faster, more efficient, more powerful with every generation. But there was one problem Apple couldn't solve. Designing a revolutionary chip is one thing. Manufacturing billions of them with almost perfect precision is something else entirely. Apple searched across the world for a company capable of turning its designs into reality. Again and again, the answer was the same: TSMC. At first, the partnership looked like a normal business deal, but over time, it became one of the most important relationships in the technology industry. Every year, Apple pushed its chip designs further than anyone thought possible, and every year, TSMC found a way to manufacture them. The A-series chips transformed the smartphone industry. Then came Apple Silicon. When Apple introduced the M1 chip, the entire computer industry was shocked. Laptops suddenly delivered incredible performance, while consuming far less power than their competitors. Reviews called it revolutionary. Competitors rushed to respond. But behind every headline praising Apple's engineering, there was another story that almost nobody talked about. None of it would have been possible without TSMC. While Apple designed the future, TSMC manufactured it. Together, they proved something extraordinary. The future of technology wouldn't belong to the companies with the biggest factories. It would belong to the companies with the best ideas and the best manufacturing partner. Other companies quickly noticed. AMD turned to TSMC. Qualcomm followed. Then came a company that would completely redefine the future of artificial intelligence: NVIDIA. 4 years, NVIDIA was known mainly for gaming graphics cards, but inside universities and research labs, scientists had discovered something unexpected. NVIDIA's GPUs weren't just good at rendering video games. They were astonishingly good at training artificial intelligence. Suddenly, every major tech company wanted more GPUs than NVIDIA could produce. OpenAI needed them. Microsoft needed them. Google, Meta, Amazon, everyone was racing to build larger and more powerful AI models. Demand exploded almost overnight. But NVIDIA faced exactly the same challenge as Apple. It could design the most advanced AI chips on Earth, but it couldn't manufacture them alone. Once again, there was only one company capable of producing these incredibly complex processors at the scale and quality required. And that meant the AI revolution, the biggest technological shift of the 21st century, was quietly being built inside the factories of TSMC. But as the world became more dependent on one company, a dangerous question began to emerge. What if that company suddenly couldn't deliver? If TSMC is so important, Why hasn't anyone replaced it? It's a question that sounds simple. After all, Apple has trillions of dollars. NVIDIA is one of the most valuable companies in history. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they all have nearly unlimited resources. Governments are willing to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to secure their own chip supply. So why not just build another TSMC? Because the biggest advantage in this industry isn't money, it's time. Imagine trying to become the world's greatest surgeon overnight. You could buy the best hospital, the most advanced equipment, and hire brilliant doctors, but you still wouldn't have decades of experience. Chip manufacturing works the same way. Every tiny improvement comes from years of trial and error. Every mistake teaches a lesson. Every new generation of chips pushes physics closer to its absolute limit. TSMC has spent nearly 40 years solving problems that most companies haven't even encountered yet. And that's an advantage you simply can't buy. Then there's the technology itself. Manufacturing today's most advanced AI chips requires machines so extraordinary that only one company in the world can build them. These aren't ordinary factory tools. They're engineering masterpieces, containing hundreds of thousands of precision components, using beams of extreme ultraviolet light to carve billions of microscopic transistors onto a single silicon wafer. Each machine costs hundreds of millions of dollars. It takes months to assemble, months to calibrate, and even longer before it can produce chips at the level companies like Apple and NVIDIA demand. But owning these machines doesn't guarantee success. They're only as good as the people operating them. Thousands of highly trained engineers monitor every stage of production, checking for imperfections measured in atoms, because even the smallest defect can destroy an entire batch of chips worth millions of dollars. That's why building a semiconductor factory isn't like building a car factory or a smartphone assembly line. It's closer to building a scientific laboratory inside a spacecraft while trying to achieve perfection every second of every day. This is the reason